The CGA Tour, a podcast unlike any other. Now your host, Calvin Alexander.
Hey Cowboy fans, today's episode is brought to you by Oakley Burklow, your go-to independent insurance agent and proud OSU alum. Oakley helps with home, auto, life, and business insurance, working with multiple top-rated insurance companies to find you the right coverage at the right price. Licensed in Oklahoma and Arkansas. Call 918-280-9068 or email oakley.burklow@connectmyinsurance.com. Personal service, honest advice, and a fellow poke helping you protect what matters most.
Welcome back to the latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast and
Wildcat Radio 2.0.
As we do a joint podcast here, I'm joined by Brett of course, Wildcat Radio 2.0, and I'm joining on their segment as well, kind of a dual episode previewing the Oklahoma State-Arizona Wildcat matchup here this weekend as Oklahoma State travels out west for a road game that I think is much anticipated from the Oklahoma State side. How many Wildcat, how many crazy plays can we draw up, and can Arizona win and keep their unbeaten at home streak alive, right?
I mean, as somebody that has in the not so distant past experienced a disappointing football team, I understand where you're coming from these days. And we're still trying to figure it out ourselves.
Yeah, I'd say there's only a couple more guys they can fire really during the season. Yeah, we fire the head coach. All right, got it. Fire the defensive coordinator. Okay, who could be next? Will we end up firing the special teams guy? I don't know. So we'll see here. To be determined on that front. But basically, if you're an Oklahoma State fan, what are the optimistic reasons and optimistic kind of viewpoints Oklahoma State fans could have of why it'd be a good contest here going out west?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you want me to give you some room for hope, Arizona has not. I mean, they're only one season removed from last year's disaster, right? Where they were less than the sum of their parts. I think on the outside, people assume that because you lost Tedero McMillan and some other big name guys to the NFL, Tyler Loop, is the kicker in the NFL now. You don't see a lot of teams play that poorly in the season and with that much talent on it at the high end. So there's a lot of new faces, and that was a big unknown coming into the season. And so far, so decently good, I think, for Arizona. They kind of beat up on two lesser opponents, but a good team is supposed to do that. But they haven't been perfect by any means. They've kind of had problems in all of those games, even in the ones they were blowing the doors off of Hawaii and Weber State. The offensive line was very uneven. They had something like 6 or 7 holding penalties in one game, which is, talk about, and those I think half of those were in the red zone. The line generally looked better last week in the loss at Iowa State, but Arizona didn't play as badly, I think, as the score showed, but they're clearly not at the level that Iowa State is right now. So they're still a beatable team. They still have, they're working things out. The Noah Fafita's not been perfectly sharp, nor have the receivers been, which is kind of something that you hope you can work out. So I think the reason for the glimmer of optimism is Arizona's team hasn't quite figured everything out, and there's special teams have also been bluntly atrocious. So that's one of those little things that ends up losing you games that you should win. So they're better than they were last year collectively, but they're certainly not a finished product yet, and that leaves them vulnerable.
Yeah, I'd say from the Oklahoma State standpoint, we're hoping to see a touchdown from our quarterback. We're going to see the first passing touchdown from our quarterback this season, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but I think our wide receiver hybrid quarterback, because he's a former quarterback, has the sole passing touchdown for our team this season. Except for I think Hosseini got one week 1, but I honestly, so much has happened between week 1 UT Martin versus Oklahoma State now. It seems insane to even try to think back to that. I will say, we have the TNT game. So everyone else, K-State, Baylor, ESPN Plus. So that's unfortunate for them. They're downgraded. We're on the prominent network here, TNT with the show. We've got all the former SEC and Big Ten guys telling us about Big 12 football, which would be fun. But I guess in my mind here, you guys played one conference game. You played 3 technically non-conference games here. We're both tied in the conference overall loss column with 1 loss apiece. Now, granted, the pre-story before that is very different, but it is. I mean, is Brett Brennan on the hot seat this year? Is there anything going on? Is Noah Fafita, you guys kind of, hey, all right, he's been around a while. It seems like, after this year, you're ready to move on a little bit, or are you still kind of, hey, he's great. He could take us all the way Big 12 championship game or do whatever. Has any of your preseason kind of viewpoints changed now that we're 4 games in?
So I'm the weirdo that had the hot take that this team had a real chance to win 8 games 6 months ago when no one thought that. Of course, on our pod before the Iowa State game, we had a guest on and they were talking about, you win Iowa State, you're going to win 9 or 10 games. And I'm the one then pumping the brakes there. I try to be a realist. I think in terms of Brent Brennan, his seat was hotter than it should have been after 1 season at the end of last year. And there was continued optimism that he was doing the right things throughout the offseason in terms of, they replaced the coordinators, which has been, Dino Babers' offense last year. No one actually knows what they were trying to accomplish in that offense. And Seth Dagey is an aggressive young offensive coordinator. Play calling hasn't been perfect, nor has execution been. And some of that's probably just, guys learning a new system, lots of new guys on the team. But Danny Gonzalez, his defensive coordinator, was on the staff last year, but came on as defensive coordinator and has had success in the past at Arizona State years ago. And that defense has, there was a lot of unknowns on the D line and the in the linebacker room, and those positions have looked pretty darn good. People keep forgetting that Arizona also, I don't know how even Arizona fans are forgetting, they got Joe Salavea as a D line coach, who was that's a big name. It's his second stint at Arizona. He's had great success. I think people just forget that he's a great developer of talent because he won so many recruiting battles when he was at Oregon with Cristobal and going to some of these big schools. So the happiness is the delta between expectations and reality oftentimes in life and in sports. And I think most casual fans had low expectations coming into this season, probably too low. But the fun of that is when your expectations are low and you look like a decently competent football team, you kind of enjoy the ride a little bit more. So I think Brent Brennan is looking pretty safe, barring some kind of disaster the rest of the season. Noah Fafita, we had Justin Spears of the Arizona Daily Star on in the offseason. He's pretty tight with the Fafita family. I think he's sticking around. He's not. He doesn't have the build for the to go to the NFL, right? And he's been a bit inconsistent. I know we know what he can do when they won the Alamo Bowl a couple years ago, and then last year he kind of struggled and was hunting T-Mac a little bit too much. And we're going to see how he and Dagey can adapt to each other with the new receivers. But it's, I think for the most part, Arizona fans are relatively happy with the start, even after the Iowa State game. Now, if they come into this game against Oklahoma State, who's been reeling a bit and, firing coaches left and right, as you said, I think that temperature on the seat might start to get turned up pretty quickly. The thing with Arizona last year was they didn't just lose in the games they lost. They looked terrible in the games they didn't look competent while they were losing in the games they lost. Even in the Iowa State game, they just kind of got beat by a superior team that played a flawless game. Arizona didn't play a flawless game on the road against a top 15 team, and they got beat, right? So I think Arizona fans are looking towards this game and, maybe a little too sure of themselves that this will be a surefire win. Granted, it's at home, and I think Arizona fans have a reason to feel confident. But I also think Arizona fans have a long enough memory; they shouldn't feel overly confident against any opponent. But Cal, tell me what's going on in Oklahoma State? Who's still left in the coaching room? What do you got that's good on the football team? To paraphrase Apollo 13.
So we have one of the weird situations going on with our offense, just because we have, I think what everyone would want to see the guy play quarterback is listed as wide receiver going into the season on the team is Sam Jackson V. He actually has thrown a touchdown pass for TCU against Oklahoma State in Boone Pickens when he's the quarterback for TCU, not forever ago. Why I bring up TCU is that's where our offensive coordinator turned head coach, Doug, gosh, I keep always doing this. Doug Meacham has come from. And so he's got a little bit of repertoire with Sam Jackson V because, Doug Meacham was at TCU before coming back home to Stillwater, quote unquote. And there's a little bit of, okay, well, he looked pretty darn good, had a lot of zip on the ball. We're big into the terminology of zip here in Stillwater. And I love it. I'm all for it. Like, I'm all for any like kind of bright kind of hopes. But if you're an Arizona fan and you're looking at the game, you're wondering where the number 18 is on the field for Oklahoma State, because that's really the one guy who's shown some playmaking abilities besides our running back and Rodney Fields Jr. Rodney Fields Jr. looks really, really good when given the ball. We've got another guy named Trent Howland, who I also would put up there. But again, I'm talking about a team here from Oklahoma State that inside the numbers, right? Like, our total offense per game is 92nd in the country. Your guys' total defense per game is 17th in the country. This should not necessarily be too close of a contest, but forgive me when I'm trying to get hyped up a little bit about our team and what success we've had over the last week in a game that we looked semi halfway decent in. We scored more points, and we scored more points in the first half of last week's game against Baylor than we have in any first half all season. And in fact, we tied our final score for the entire game in week 1 against UT Martin in the first half against Baylor. So, like, there's something to be said that there's some wrinkles to the offense that could still probably be there. There's always fluky stuff that can happen in the Big 12 all the time. Do I expect us to win? No. Would I put money on Oklahoma State to win? No. But do I think Oklahoma State and a brand new defensive coordinator who, if you're trying to look at this from Oklahoma State fans' perspective of, yeah, I'm driving out to Tucson, I'm going to go to the game. What are you saying in your head? You're like, hey, offensively last week we looked weird. We looked different. We didn't look like a normal Oklahoma State run up the middle kind of bland offense. We looked like we had some motion going, and we were bringing the motion as well. And then defensively, you're like, hey, maybe the guys all rally around the third string quarterback's dad, who is our defensive coordinator at the time, at the moment here, who's a very well qualified candidate, I will say as well. But Bowen as the DC, I think that could bring some wrinkles as well too. Maybe Arizona doesn't know exactly what to think of, running against Oklahoma State defense, right? You just haven't seen the new defensive concepts. But at the end of the day, like, I think I'd be at the game in the first quarter going, all right, Arizona's up 14-0. What did I expect? Right. And so this is one, I'd rather do glass half full guy and really just tell you the glass is actually completely full. And we're all of a sudden, filling it up with a bunch of helium and oxygen air because there's something in there besides just nothing, because that's how the environment works. But again, I'm going, there's really nothing there. There is just, the bottom falls out pretty quickly. Josh Ford, our tight end, who I would say has got the most NFL type potential as a sophomore, is questionable for the game. And we really don't seem to have found that guy who can actually be under center or from shotgun and Zane Flores and really have command over the offense. He looked good in some moments last week against Baylor for the first time this season, but we've got some guys who could probably give you a little bit of, I don't know if I'm saying that a running back that's the size of a modern day fullback in Derrick Henry. Now Trent Howland's no one to compare to Derrick Henry, but the guy averages more than 5 yards a carry when he gets the ball. And then you got Rodney Fields Jr., who's the change of pace back, who's kind of more of the, guy in the backfield of, if I'm really trying to stretch it out here, Ollie Gordon-esque would not be him. He's not that big. He's more like Chuba Hubbard size. And, he's not that fast. He's also a sophomore. He's got a lot of time to develop. But those would be the guys where I'm like, okay, there's 3 guys for Oklahoma State that if offensively they start doing well, this is something to take note of later on in the game if they're kind of trying to bring a comeback. But I expect Arizona to hit us right in the mouth from the moment the ball snaps and kind of have command of the game. And maybe Oklahoma State just stays in it this week a little bit more. Because last week against Baylor, we stayed in it a lot more than we thought we would, and we covered the spread. Now, We'll say the spread was 20.5 points, but we covered it. We covered it by 2 points. We covered it. We had 8. It was an 18-point spread at the end of the game. I think it was 45-27, if I remember correctly. So there's always some sunshine that I'm going to paint. And some orange-colored glasses that I've got on, but they're not as bright as they used to be because there's not much to go off of.
Well, let me share some wisdom from an Arizona fan perspective, because you guys haven't had a coach get fired in a hot minute. And Arizona fans have a lot of experience with this in the last 20 years that Gundy was at Oklahoma State as head coach. You can get a bit of a bounce and a lift from a new coach if it's just not working. Even though I think Gundy is a pretty darn good coach, there's a reason he was so successful in his tenure there. But there's when things aren't working, especially in football and especially in college football, if the whole team isn't pulling the rope in the same direction as hard as they can, it doesn't take a lot of weaknesses in that chain to mix my metaphor to make it all fall apart. So sometimes having that kind of change up can, move things quite a bit. I mean, even Arizona with changing the coordinators in the offseason, even when one of them was on staff, it's a night and day difference in terms of just, you can see it in the attitude for Arizona especially on the defensive side of the ball. They come to hit across the board, which is not something you could have said always about Arizona football in the last, since the Mike Stoops era, at least. And so they run a kind of crazy 3-3-5, and Danny Gonzalez will change stuff around. They'll probably confuse your guys' offense, especially if they're trying to work in new schemes, which gives me a little more comfort as an Arizona fan that, when you're doing crazy schemes and it's aggressive, it's always at risk of giving up the big plays, which maybe that is the glimmer of hope when you got some talent on the offensive side of the ball to be a big play threat. And then I think, like I said, Arizona still doesn't have it quite all clicking on offense yet. And there's always an opportunity for mistakes to be made. Sometimes Arizona's gotten too cute by half. They were marching down the field against, I believe was it Iowa State or Kansas State? And they had 2 or 3 straight first downs and then run a wide receiver pass. And it was the first interception throw of the season for some, why are they doing that when you're running 8 yards a carry? I joked in the second game of the season, I think Seth Dagey calls the same offense as I do in my college football 25 legacy. But even I don't call wide receiver passes because that's just crazy. So, I think from an outsider's perspective, I could, Arizona fans, I think say, oh, a new coach is fired. A coach is fired. Sometimes that gives a team a significant lift. When Makovic left, they weren't good all of a sudden, but they showed a lot more fight. They were tougher out. And I think that always if you're aligned and you're a tougher out, you always have a chance of the ball bouncing your way on a random fumble or something like that. And it's college football, so it's always going to have a chance for craziness. But my overall sense is that if Arizona plays a relatively clean game, they should win this, and should win it relatively handily, as long as they don't try to get too cute. Throwing wide receiver passes. They've got guys that are kind of working their way back from injury. And even in the first couple of games, Cal, Arizona held out a bunch of the new guys that have looked pretty good in flashes, and some of it they're trying to save, I think, for conference play. Some of them got to get more reps against Iowa State, and it didn't go that great. And there's, like I said, Arizona's still figuring it out. And not to be dismissive to your listeners and Oklahoma State fans, but I feel like this is kind of the get back right game after they kind of got took a little bit of a beating against Iowa State, at least on the scoreboard. Like in total yards, they weren't that far off. They just got beat. Iowa State just out physicaled them. Their tight ends kind of created problems. Arizona's corners did not play well. Arizona's safeties are legitimately great, which I think always kind of limits a little bit of what teams can do to them as long as they're scheming right, because those safeties are talented and tough and physical. So they are, Genesis Smith is a guy that I would expect to look real good against you guys, as he's looked in almost every game. I think he's had a couple of one or two interceptions and had a couple more. He almost had a one-handed one, like an insane one in the end zone on a 60-yard pass while flipping upside down and nearly caught it. I think RG3 was the commentator and was like, man, that was going to be, SC top 10 for the month kind of play. He's a guy that's going to be playing on Sundays soon. But yeah, as an Arizona fan, we've been through the doldrums, I think, more than Oklahoma State. Adam and I spent a long time on the podcast during the 20-game losing streak, which were, we don't get the most listeners during those times, but we had a great time during it because there's something fun about embracing the suck when your team is struggling a little bit. But I don't think that Arizona has shown enough against enough talent this season yet to say they can just walk in and beat Oklahoma State. I still think they need to play their game, and if they play their game effectively, then I think they'll win handily. But I think they need to prove it a little bit more before we get overconfident.
Yeah, I think this is actually a game where you guys will learn a lot more about your team than we will about our own team. I think right now we know pretty much what there is to know about our team, unless the defense somehow steps up here. I think that the new coaching change high may have been last week against Baylor, and we may have needed to save it a little bit for, maybe we need that pump up against Arizona, or maybe we need it against, Cincinnati on homecoming or whatever it may be, because against Baylor, we didn't win. I mean, it didn't go well. And I'd also say there's one thing working for Oklahoma State, if I'm really trying to be all like orange tinted glasses here, and that's that we are better against the pass than we are against the run, and you guys are better at passing than you are running. Granted, I'm playing on the margins here when I'm saying it, because it's literally Arizona passing offense per game 51st, Arizona rushing offense per game 64th. So I'm talking about 13 different spots separating here. And I'm also talking about 13 different spots for Oklahoma State here, where our passing defense per game is 113th in the country, and our rushing defense per game is 126th. So I thought the parallels of it both being 13 spots different was a little bit funny to bring up. But there's nothing else more than that on this. I mean, every single stat that Oklahoma State put out, this is on okstate.com/news, is where I'm getting all these stats from. So this is not something that we're naive and maybe we'll pull it off or whatever. No, this is something that like the fans can send out about, hey, look forward to this matchup this weekend. See if Oklahoma State can improve on the defense last week, giving up 219 yards to Baylor. On the ground, by the way, not in the air. 219 yards in the game would be insanely great for an Oklahoma State team. I mean, and historically, we have not been an excellent defense. This has been a more, hey, we're going to beat you. There's a couple years right around the Jim Knowles era and the Jim Knowles era in 2021 that it's like, hey, you know what? Our defense looks kind of decent. But last year it fell off the wagon early, and this year it really has as well too. So to be expected that, we've done the necessary steps here to make changes to the team and the personnel, and the roster's definitely changed as well, with guys sitting out and possibly taking red shirts and that type of thing as well too. And just wanted to try to enter the portal now if they can. Who knows what's up with that at this point? But if I'm really looking at this, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Arizona's probably going to go, all right, yeah, when we played Oklahoma State, we only covered the spread of 20.5 points. When Oklahoma State only won a game this year, we probably should have beaten by more. That kind of explains a couple more games on our schedule. Or, hey, we showed up against Oklahoma State. They had some fight. We beat them. Wasn't the easiest game ever. And that showed, that we were able to win tougher matchups later on in the season, because we beat Oklahoma State by as much as we should, but then the tougher games, as far as long they got, we were able to kind of rebound, because you had the, it's kind of like I'm playing basketball against my brother in the driveway who's 10 years younger than me. Hey, I stand a pretty good darn chance when I'm 20 and he's 10. But when I'm 32 and he's 22, all of a sudden, man, I got to dig real deep back into those days where it was 10 years ago and go, man, how am I doing here? Right. And I think that's what you guys maybe will gain from this game, is digging back deep a little bit and going, yeah, we were able to just fend off Oklahoma State the last couple minutes when they were making some drives down there in the fourth and third quarters. Trying to keep this one close. And we're able to fend them off then. That's why we're able to beat this BYU team. Yeah, they're playing the week after or whatever it may be, right? Like if you're looking for things to take out of this game, besides just, all right, we walked through and we won the game we should. It's, okay, we won the game we should, and we also won it in this fashion. Kind of those mentality kind of wins that maybe help you out a little bit more down the line. Not sure.
Yeah, I think, it's funny you mentioned the passing and rushing for Arizona. I think most Arizona fans would tell you that the passing game is worse than the rushing game this season because a lot of that came in a couple of those. Javen Watley had a couple of huge, long catches early in the season against Hawaii.
And against Weber State, he led the team with 168 yards receiving in one game.
Yeah, well, it was most of that's on like 2 catches.
It's crazy.
He's a speedster, and so, but like I said, Arizona they looked pretty decent. Well, they had very big ups and downs against K-State. The first half they straight up dominated. The third quarter against K-State, I don't know if you watched or any of your listeners did. It was reminiscent of the 70-7 start of the game for Arizona versus ASU because it was just everything went terribly wrong. Dropped punts that got blocked. Thrown, first play from scrimmage they gave up a 75-yard run. They were dominating the game, and then suddenly the game was tied, like almost instantaneously. But they showed that they had resilience and came back. My co-host, I think, wrote a whole column on it. That's the difference between this team and Arizona teams that struggle. I sometimes oversimplify it and say winners win, and even when they're not playing well, they find ways to win. And to your point, I think for this game for Arizona, I think most Arizona fans and probably the staff want to see the defense continue to do what it's been doing. I think there's a reasonable chance that Arizona's defense dominates again this game, just with what I'm hearing from you and what I've seen in the stats and kind of the changing up the schemes. And Arizona's going to find ways to confuse people that are trying to change up the schemes, and they're tough and physical and aggressive, and might get a trick play or two, but that also can create a lot of other problems the other way for the other team. I think for most Arizona fans, though, I think they want to see the offense look crisp, I think, more than anything, and effective, because they've been a little disjointed. The receivers have been dropping a lot of passes. Noah Fafita's been, a little off on his throws, a little off on his, where he's, he threw an interception because he kind of turned his back and then didn't see a guy drift back in a cover 2 and picked off a pass that looked open until it wasn't, kind of thing. So I think if Arizona I don't know if they're going to try to go Javen Watley 70-yard bombs every time like they did against Weber State and trying against Hawaii with some of those deep passes. I wouldn't be surprised if they just try to be very crisp and efficient and methodical and then still take a couple of shots just to kind of get right on the offensive side of the ball. And I think if they do that and take care of the ball, Arizona will probably cover, because that means they're not turning the ball over, and I have faith that this defense is going to create problems for Oklahoma State. I think the only way Arizona probably loses this game is if they beat themselves to a large extent. More about Oklahoma State. What has to go right for Oklahoma State for them to have a shot in this?
Zane Flores, our quarterback and starting quarterback, who's been heralded with the program, was Nebraska Gatorade Player of the Year, was getting recruited by University of Nebraska when Dylan Raiola was getting recruited there as well too, held in really high regard. He has to show that recruiting level that he was regarded at. That's really what has to happen in my mind. He has to show big in this game. He has to put 2 feet on the ground, step into passes, make confident throws and decisions, and really show a side of him that he hasn't shown yet, to be honest. He needs to be allowed to maybe make a couple more times where he has chances to run the ball a little bit and do some things that are not normally expected out of him as a pocket passer for us to win, because it's going to take a lot. It just will. I mean, you guys are favored by 20.5 points. So our quarterback's going to have to show a side of him he hasn't shown yet to win the game. And, or it's got to be a lot of Arizona shot themselves in the foot and we took advantage of it, new defensive schemes, maybe. I don't know. I don't know how many new defensive schemes they're putting in on a week where it's not a short week or anything. It's a Saturday, but how much is your defense really changing when your defense was 40 pages long coming into the season and you need to fire the defense coordinator? So there just has to be a lot of things that are not predictable happening for Oklahoma State to pull this off. Nothing that happens as far as, okay, I've seen this before. We looked good doing this, so we can do this again. That just hasn't happened this year, really. And the UT Martin game is such a fond memory. It seems so distant, even though it was 2 months ago. It was in August, literally, but it was, a month and a week ago. So it shouldn't be that hard to believe we could pull off a win and score 27 and somehow be in the W column again. But it just seems so far-fetched against a team that looks as good as you guys do. I have to say, coming into the season, if you had told me, hey, Arizona's, 2-2, they've lost two games to two conference opponents, even though K-State game, I guess, didn't count as a conference matchup. Because you guys played 10 conference opponents this year. So SEC, they can really just suck it overall because they're only playing 8. But if you told me you guys were 2-2, and I'd be like, all right, well, they beat Weber State and Hawaii, and we've lost to Tulsa in a fluky game. Okay, all right, that sucks. But we're 1-3. All right, well, we were probably going to beat UT Martin, and no matter what, we're going to beat Oregon. And Baylor game I could see. I go, all right, you know what? Weird, but all right. But then the way that the actual stuff has happened around the scenes, this is one of those not on paper things that you can't just measure, except for the fact that I guess the head coaching personnel did change. And you go, oh, okay, well, something horrible happened, because all of a sudden you add in but Gundy's been fired. Oh, well, all right. There's just no way we're going to see a win here. It seems so far of a distant, possibility of actually happening.
Yeah, and the thing about this Arizona team, and it was my hope in the offseason that gave me some of the confidence, is that there's not necessarily the star power on this team, but they play collectively like a tough team, where there's a lot of guys, there's a lot of FCS guys that are hungry for a shot to level up, and most of them, not all of them, but most of them looked pretty darn good. Some of those guys on the D line at the linebacker spot, Deshaun McKnight's looked awesome. Riley Wilson has shown incredible flashes. Max Harris has made me raise my eyebrows on a few plays, and I'm usually not go whoa on an individual player making a hit, especially for Arizona. They're some of our favorite kind of people we have on the pod that are close to the program, say that last year's 1 through 10 on the roster was great. There's like 3-4 NFL guys on there, right? The problem was 11 through 90 on the roster. And I think there's like 61 new guys on the roster this year. So it was really just a big question mark. And, part of it, part of my optimism was last year, this team was worse. They were less than the sum of their parts, and they should have probably beat Texas Tech. And there was another game they probably should have won. And then suddenly they're in a bowl game, right? They're not that far from that, despite as awful as they looked in a lot of their losses. I mean, just god awful, atrocious, pathetic. But there still was talent there. And then they've kind of recycled out a lot of these guys with hungry guys that play hard. And you replace the coordinators and you get Joe Salabay in there. I think they are that tough out that you need to be. And then that puts you in a position to win a lot of games, especially in a crazy Big 12. It was the most unpredictable conference last year. And we've asked some people, we've had a couple of the data guys is chaos a friend for Arizona in the Big 12? I think it is, because they're the kind of team that can take advantage of chaos in the conference, because I think they're going to be a tough out every week. And I think there's a lot of 60-40 propositions, even in the tough games. But also I think Arizona fans, circled this game as like, oh, this is what we should win, right? I think we kind of talked about it in the preseason. I thought the K-State game this is going to be the tell early, is this a bowl team or not? And it's going to set the tone for the rest of the season. And it almost set the tone in both directions within the same game, but they ended up winning. I had Iowa State as the game that we're 100% going to lose all off season. And then, everybody starts being like, well, maybe they win this and maybe they're ranked suddenly. And then I joked that my co-host was like, well, no, they probably won't be ranked until they beat Oklahoma State. And no offense to you and your fans, but if Arizona beat Iowa State, I don't think beating Oklahoma State at home was going to be the difference between being ranked and not. But they didn't. So that's something that we don't even need to contemplate yet. But I do think this Arizona team tends to not spiral. Even when things go badly, they're mentally tough as much as they are physically tough, right? And that's what you need out of a football team, especially if you're one that is going to depend on, FCS guys and those high 3-star recruits. Arizona's not going to get T-Max every year. If they get one every 10 years, fantastic. they need to win with a lot of, the top 800, like the underappreciated high 3-star guys and the developmental guys, especially on the lines, and then hope you can supplement and get a few, handful of 4-stars. And I mean, I'll take every team act that wants to come to Arizona for sure. But Arizona's also fortunate to have a player like Noah Fifita who helped. He went to the same high school as T-Mac, Keon Burnett, Jacob Manu, who's now at Washington, and he's also pretty tight with Arizona's probable quarterback of the future. They have a 4-star quarterback, so I think he's going to stick around for another year, largely to mentor him as a probably redshirt freshman next year. So I think there's enough leadership end to end in the program that it makes it so. If you got through last year, now that you're starting to you have people that are all wanting to be on the bus. I think a lot of last year was a lot of guys that, some donors made sure they wouldn't all follow Jed Fish to Washington, and some people get, some teenagers get paid, and when you do stuff just for money, you tend to do stuff just for money, right? I think there's guys that are in this program now that are bought into what they're trying to do with Brent Brennan, which in college football that matters. Like, with Gundy, he's lost the team, he's lost the team. It's time to make a choice. He's done, right? This team is Brent Brennan's team after 61 guys, rotated off. Keon Burnett transferred away and then transferred back in the same offseason, right? So people are choosing, especially in the age of the transfer portal and NIL, to play for Brent Brennan and staff. And I think it's shown up on the field. And that's why I feel pretty confident about where they're going to go the rest of the season. Even if their ceiling isn't the Alamo Bowl, I think they're going to be a pretty good team. And I think they're going to, I think they're going to win handily this weekend, but I just don't, I've been burned before, Cal.
Yeah. We have two, and we have two from pessimism. So I'll say, hey, if Gundy's at the helm and all of a sudden we're, 2-2 and playing this game, but there are just so many things coming into this one that I could say like that of, if you told me last year we went to the Big 12 championship and then this year we're off to a rocky 1-3 start, I'd go, yeah, it kind of makes sense. All our chips were due last year. We had, a 7th-year senior. We had Ollie Gordon to get drafted to the NFL. We had 3 guys, total get drafted. Definitely 2 of our mainstay defensive guys, Nick Martin and Colin Oliver, got drafted, and we had a corner get drafted as well too. So all of that together, I'd go, yeah, no, makes sense that this year we wouldn't be as good or anywhere near as close as last year. Just also sucks that last year we also sucked. That kind of adds to it. And then when you're looking at everything, you're like, all right, well, Arizona's favored by 20.5, and I was hoping we'd win the Baylor game coming to this one, and all of a sudden we didn't even get to the Baylor game before Gundy got fired. So he got fired right before then. So that something bad happened real early on, and it is what it is. We're reading the tea leaves. It seems like, hey, maybe we got a bunch of guys going around defensive coordinator, and that brings me to ask you, do you think we cover the spread as we kind of wrap this one up here? The spread is, it's 20.5. Do you think Arizona goes, yeah, it's going to be more than 20.5, or does Oklahoma State cover it?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that. I hate large.
I like doing the score prediction, but the score prediction at the end of the day is really a spread prediction. It's really more of like, hey, yeah, do I think Oklahoma State scores 28 or 32? Probably honestly 10, but still, it's more of that.
Yeah, I hate I don't bet on sports that often, and when I do, I really, really hate the large spreads because there's just so much that can go awry there, especially with large spreads, because that means there's going to be garbage time. So I am torn between but the number that jumps out of my mind would have been an 18.5 spread. I feel like it's going to be like an 18-point win. So I guess I'll take the that Oklahoma State will cover. But I don't feel good about that because I think there's actually a pretty decent chance if Arizona takes this as the opportunity to learn from Iowa State and gets right on offense. I think it could get pretty ugly. But then that can lead to garbage time points at the end for Oklahoma State. So I guess I'll take Oklahoma State to cover, but I reserve the right for a 30-point blowout for Arizona.
Yeah, I'm going to say actually that line is pretty close to perfect. I would expect Oklahoma State to come back and pretty much be at that 20-point difference to make it kind of a couple garbage time touchdowns. But then again, I really just see this as we do not have a lot of talent on the defensive side of the football. So regardless if the guys want to really rally around the new interim DC that came from within the program or not, he could only have built up so much equity with the team for them to really run a rally around him and be the new DC for all of that to work. It's a bunch of mental things. Mentality can take you very, very far away in life, but I don't see it stopping what seems to be pretty darn decent offense overall when we've been a pretty darn bad defense overall, and that's against the UT Martins and the Tulsas of the world. It's not like we've been playing, it's not like we've played Oregon twice, where we played two, non-con Power Fives, and one of them was Florida State. When we played Oregon at Oregon, I'm sure that doesn't make anything look good, but then again, our defense gave up only 55 points that game, but Oregon scored a total of 69. So if you pick up what I'm putting down, our offense isn't good either because they're allowing 14 points a game. So I predict us to be maybe 42-22. I'm very, very pessimistic here in this because the Oklahoma State talking points are, who's the next head coach? Could it be G.J. Kinney? Could it be we're not talking about this as hey, do you think Brett Brennan would actually want to come to Stillwater because we're known as more of a football school? Right? None of this is on the table. None of this from a lower level Power 4 guy who, all due respect to Arizona, you guys, as you've told me on the podcast, are not a football powerhouse. And we're not talking about, oh man, could we possibly get, the Texas Tech head coach to come to Oklahoma State where we've been better at football for a longer more of time recently? Like, we're not talking about any of this. We're not talking about Sonny Dykes or anything. And we don't seem to have the money to do it either, except for we've been paying Gundy top Big 12 money every single year for the past 10 years. So Brett Brennan's currently making less than half the salary than Mike Gundy was making this year in Stillwater after taking $1 million pay cut for this year. So there's just we have the ability to get top coaches. We have the ability to pay top coaches, but we're not talking about hey, maybe Sam Pittman would want to, maybe he'd have a better shot in Stillwater than he would in the heavy pressurized SEC West. But we're not talking about that. Instead, we're talking about, hey, maybe we can get a Texas State guy or North Texas guy, or maybe we can really go out on a limb and get a USF guy here and do stuff. And maybe we go get the offensive coordinator from OU. Who knows? Love to see Ben Arbuckle in Stillwater, and John Mateer ends up taking a medical red shirt. That would be a dream come true, but I just don't see it happening. And I'm a little bit sad that, when you get rid of your head coach mid-season, that means you're only going to be talking about the next head coach the rest of the season, even though there still are, there were 9 more games. Now there's 8 more games left to play for Oklahoma State because they had an early bye week. So I predict us, long story long here, I predict us to be right at the spread, cover it, but maybe by a point like you do, and live to fight another day, which basically means hopefully homecoming's close, and it's more of a game against Cincinnati.
See, hear all of your conversation about head coach searches. I think Arizona fans are probably saying, man, I hope the Arizona offense doesn't look as good as they did against crappy defenses against Hawaii and Weber State, because he's going to be a guy that's going to be on the fast track somewhere. I think he's got the ambition. I think Brent Brandon, this is his destination job, for better or worse. Some people hate that. Some people love that. I and my co-host, I think, are of the mind of, if people are poaching your coaches, that means you've already done good things. And people pay you. Again, you haven't experienced this. When people are paying you money to hire away your coaches rather than you're paying them $9 million to go away, Kevin Sumlin, it helps a program that is striving to get better in a dramatic way and be a lot more sustainable. And I have a creeping suspicion in the back of my mind that, I bet if Arizona's offense looks good the rest of the year, I bet Daggy gets a call. And that's just, it feels like it might be not a bad fit if things shaked out the right way. And it gives me anxiety because I'm sometimes pretty good at predicting things. I actually predicted Kenny Dillingham as the head coach of ASU 18 months before it happened, or 12 months before it happened with the Oregon pod. I was like, I think it's going to be Kenny Dillingham. I think he's going to be a good coach, and I was right on both things. It's a gift and a curse, Cal. I predict things quite effectively sometimes. So I wouldn't be surprised if you guys are at least kicking the tires on a Seth Dagey in a year.
Well, Brett, you gotta say there's only like 10 schools, maybe even less than that in the country that don't get their coach poached or not in those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And of those 10 schools, all 10 are worried their coach might go to the NFL every single year. Like if they're that good, they're getting NFL discussions. We were that team who had a coach who was getting NFL discussions, who was maybe going to the SEC every so often. And that's the guy who played for the university and played well for the university. So like we were in like the picturesque spot where the guy would never leave. And yet he still was trying to get more and more money and still trying to up and up and increase and still playing around with maybe leaving every so often. And we won one Big 12 championship with Gundy. I love Gundy. He brought us to brand new heights, all type of great stuff. I just want to say, in all reality, your program's a stepping stone unless you're literally 3 to 4 teams in the nation. You got to be Ohio State. You got to be LSU, maybe at this point, but you got to be Alabama, Ohio State. I mean, maybe right now it's just Ohio State, because if you're telling me Kalen DeBoer could go coach somewhere else, maybe a little bit less pressure, but in the Big Ten, he probably doesn't go, but who knows? I mean, there's just so many different jobs in the nation that you could just go, yeah, I could see that guy going because he's got no real ties. And that's true with so many places in the entire country. I mean, if all of a sudden Brent Venables does really, really good at OU, there will be somebody who's calling. It might not be an NCAA guy. It might be a ton of NCAA guys. And they might all be calling just to check in and say, hey, what if we paid you just about $5 million more over your contract and you came down here to LSU because it didn't work out with Brian Kelly, for example? Are we just going to say Brent Venables wouldn't even have the conversation? Like, it just seems bizarre. But
the way those things work, those conversations are had by the agents, and the terms are already done. And then it's like, well, are we doing this or what? That's basically what Jed Fish did with Washington, where he was the one slow rolling a contract extension. And I'm quite sure it's because the agent was like, this might be happening, because the agents knew when the Saban thing was happening before the media did, right? Like, all these things are done. Maybe I'm just too cynical, but these things are done weeks in advance of anybody really knowing about it. And this is whether somebody says no or not. And the agents basically say, hey, here's a double in your pay. You're not going to say no, right? And that's what Jed Fish did. Future Oklahoma State head coach Jed Fish. Let's make it happen.
I mean, I'd probably say no. I don't think I've heard his name once, and I would much rather have GJ Kenny. I'm in the.
Oh, it's a joke, because he'll go for any job that'll pay him.
Well, but I'm in the let's hire the Texas State guy on the rise. Let's not hire the guy who's a retread of a different program who's done okay at one point. That's all, Oh, yeah. I'm much more in the optimistic, like, let's go get the guy who may view us as a stepping stone and may not, because I would love to have Zach Robinson be the head coach of Oklahoma State. I think it could work out great. I can see the whole roadmap in front of me. He's 20 years and plus with Oklahoma State, but I'd be dumb to think he wouldn't be floating around with the NFL every so often, especially if he's doing halfway decent, which he would be if he's stuck around for 20 years. So I just, I love Gundy. Love that we had him at Oklahoma State. He was a great coach for as long as he wanted to be a great coach. And then I think priorities changed a little bit and different issues pop up and arise that change how you've got to coach. And you're either going to, as Brad Pitt said in a very famous movie, Moneyball, adapt or die. So, Brett, thanks so much here for joining on the latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast. Of course, I'm more than delighted to join on your guys' podcast episode here from Wildcat Radio AZ. If you're not already, follow at Wildcat Radio AZ and follow Brett D. Berry to make sure you are staying up to date on all of your latest and greatest Arizona Wildcat coverage. And then, of course, if you're not already, follow at the CGA Tour on Twitter and Instagram, or wherever you listen to podcasts, especially YouTube, to hear my great voice that I try to triumph so much and so often here. And I'm joined by our weekly guests here checking it around all great things around the Big 12, the College Huddle. So, Brett, thanks so much. Catch you guys again soon.
Bear down.
Go Pokes.
Hey, Cowboy fans. Today's episode is brought to you by Oakley Burklow, your go-to independent insurance agent and proud OSU alum. Oakley helps with home, auto, life, and business insurance, working with multiple top-rated insurance companies to find you the right coverage at the right price. licensed in Oklahoma and Arkansas. Call 918-280-9068 or email oakley.burklow@connectmyinsurance.com. Personal service, honest advice, and a fellow poke helping you protect what matters most.